Hey, it's Rick Hirschman in for John and Nancy on the John and Nancy Are Still Talking podcast, and hanging out in the studio this afternoon. And we get a call from Jonathan Cain from Journey. How cool is that? Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, Rick. I'm doing well, sir. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, we've got a show coming up next week that we'll get more into a little bit. Your show with Toto is coming up on Tuesday, and the running joke around here has kind of been, it feels like this was announced 5 years ago, because it's been a long time, and everybody's just been like, man, we got to get through winter, get through, the early part of spring, and it'll finally be here. So now we're only days away, and we'll talk about the show in just a bit. But so, Journey is famous for being the West Coast band, San Francisco, but you were a kid from Chicago. So
that's right.
You're actually going to be semi coming home. Do you still have family up there?
I do. I have some cousins that still live up in Fox Lake area. I guess the oldest cousin, he moved down here. Now he's in Florida, and my other cousin moved to Florida. So I think I only have like one or two left. There's a good friend of mine who lives in Springfield, and of course I'm a Cubs fan. I'm a Sox fan. So baseball has always been part of growing up for me in Chicago. And I actually recorded my first single in Pekin, Illinois, at Golden Voice Studios, which is not far from you guys.
Yeah, that was when was that? Was that like 72, 3, 4?
Yeah, that was early 70s, actually 60s. I was 1969, right? Wow. So Dan Fogelberg was working out of there. Mike McDonald had recorded some demos there. It was quite a noted place in the 60s. It was in a cornfield. It had a silo for an echo chamber. And Jerry Milam was the guy. And if he's listening, and if Jerry, we love you, man. He comes to Journey shows now and then. Hopefully he'll come to this next one with his lovely wife. So I've got roots in that area, we played clubs down there, and as kids, I started out pretty young with my professional career with my brother.
Wow, and that's pretty cool.
Tommy played drums, and we had everything from trios to 7-piece horn band, so we did it all.
You did a lot, because untraditionally, I suppose. I mean, you played even the accordion as a kid.
I did. I started on it, and of course moved into piano about 12, and they were just expensive, you didn't have little portables they have now, so. And I had little tiny hands, and so my teacher said, "You'll start out here." And I find out that a lot of players, Bruce Hornsby actually started on an accordion. Many, and you get to play the cool songs too. That the tarantella and the folk songs that are the salt of the earth. And I think growing up, playing those songs, the Italian songs, the French, the Polish, the Irish, really gave me a diverse melodic upbringing, that I probably wouldn't have had on the piano. And so switching over to the piano was like pretty easy for me. I had a great teacher who taught me theory, when I was in 8th grade. I ended up at the Conservatory of Chicago, where Ramsey Lewis graduated.
Wow.
So it took me far, but I still have one. I bought an accordion.
Ever
I had to get a new one. Mine died on me, and I bought one in New York.
Do you ever bust it out?
In New York, I bust it out all the time. You know it.
That's amazing.
Birthday parties. No, I guess my happy place. When I put on the accordion, it's happy.
That's fantastic. If you get a couple of minutes when you're in town, 2 blocks away from the venue is the Peoria Riverfront Museum, and they have a wall dedicated to Golden Voice, and it's just full of albums and whatnot, and it's just kind of cool to look at, and knowing you're a part of that history, I think is just super cool.
Yeah. Well, I got my first record deal thanks to Jerry Milam. He actually sent the song that I recorded to Buddy Killen in Nashville, and Buddy flew me down from Chicago on my first ever flight anywhere to sign a record deal at 19 years old.
Wow.
And he believed in me, and loved what I was doing. And I met Dottie West. I met Chet Atkins. I met Ray Stevens. It was an incredible time. I mean, I had lunch with Chet Atkins. That doesn't get any better than that,
No, so was that?
I didn't know what do you say to Chet?
No kidding. I mean, as a kid, I mean, is that just overwhelming, intimidating to meet these guys?
Yeah, but I felt like God had sent me there. I felt like this was going to be something. It's one thing when, and I didn't ask Jerry to send that tape, and he asked me my permission if he could send it around because he believed in the song. It's called "God Made Woman for Man to Love," and and Buddy took a shine to it, and the rest was history. I got my start there in Nashville at 19 years old. He brought me back. I recorded at Bobby Goldsboro studio with the Memphis Horns and the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. I got to play.
Dang.
They played my songs, Muscle Shoals rhythm sections, and gave me a new perspective on musical excellence. This is what the Cats play like, And I remember coming home in Chicago, just looking at my brother, going, "We've got to shed and get better. This is what it's supposed to sound like, Tom."
Wow.
And so it was a wake up call for both of us, and welcome to the big leagues. It's like being in the minors and getting a chance to pitch in the majors. So, but I'll never forget. And Jerry and I have stayed in touch over the years. He helped me build my studio a couple of times. I had two recording studios I built. One in Nevada in Marin County. Jerry was super helpful to fix that room, and then when I built my big room in Nashville, Addiction Sound, I called upon him several times to help me with acoustical problems, that we had.
So when
and
was
he was way ahead of the curve when it came to sound. He really was.
Well, you work with the best, you're gonna go far. So that's that's awesome. So when were you you're getting into your career, you're doing all these different things. When was the first time that you were out somewhere, you were driving, you were someplace, and you heard a song that you were a part of on the radio?
Well, it would be when I was in the Babies. Well, I should say earlier than that. Okay, so I was in Savannah, Georgia, and Buddy and I, Buddy Killen from Nashville, we had recorded a song called "Song in the City." It's a song in the city, and they had played it on the local station because I was playing a club there out of Wilmington Island in Savannah. And I remember the bartender turning on the radio and saying, "John, it's your song." I'm like, "What? They're playing my song?" "Well, yeah, they heard you were down in Savannah, so they're honoring you tonight, playing your song." I'm like, "Holy moly!"
That's still
that was the first
cool
time.
thing. It's still got to be a cool thing to hear that.
Oh, it was exciting. Yeah, but the first real big song that hit for me was "Midnight Rendezvous" when I was at that would be big time considered, AOR rock station in LA playing "Midnight Rendezvous," and I had to pull over several times because I was losing my cookies. I'm like, I might get in an accident. I better pull over and just enjoy the moment. I remember I was driving in LA somewhere, Sunset Boulevard, and I pulled over and let the song play, and I just like, oh my, that feels like
does that kind of feel like I've made it, or
No, you feel acknowledged, and it's fun. The funniest thing, Rick, is when I got up to meet Steve Perry and finally sit down with him and pick his brain about music and songs and his favorites. The thing he said to me, the thing that turned him on the most was being on the radio. And he said, "John, what the juice is for me? It's hearing my song on the radio." And I said to him, "Well, sir, you have another fan of that right here." I said, "I'm a brother in that. So let's get on the radio." and let's get on the radio a lot. And he said, I'm in.
So
we made a pact to each other that we were going to definitely make our music radio friendly. And, and then we went through all the songs and bands that he loved, and all the bands. Our list was almost identical, and the people. And I had to tell him, I said, who you remind me of, Steve, when I heard your voice the first time, it was Gary Puckett.
Oh.
And he said, I'm friends with Gary Puckett. I'm like, no way. He said, yeah, man, let's call him. He had Gary Puckett's number. And he calls him up and he goes, this is John McCain, he's a huge fan, and, da-da-da-da-da. And then Gary shows up at one of the gigs. And, yeah, one of the great voices, I think, of all time was Gary. Young girl got out of my life. Come on, man.
No kidding. No kidding.
It was as good as Bobby Hatfield, the Unchained Melody,
Yeah.
I always remembered, hearing his voice going, man, what in the world what is that? It was just so wonderful to hear that powerful tenor that he had, and it's just like Perry. I mean, Perry was one of a kind, unique. He didn't sound like Gary Puckett, but he sure sang like him, with a lot of soul, and he could soar, with the best of them.
Absolutely.
And still does, by the way. He's still singing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Singing on other people. He sang on Dolly Parton's record, just recently. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, the duet thing?
Yeah, the duet, So I'm super happy that he's back and singing. And, it's funny, my daughter married Trev Lukather, who was Steve Lukather's son, and Toto. So it's a family affair out here on the road. And they met at a Journey show in L.A. at the Forum when we were playing the Forum, and Toto was opening, and it was really cool. Trev took a shine on my daughter, and the rest is history. But Trev knows Steve pretty well, and Steve is a fan of his band, Effect. It's called The Effect, and has been supporting him and helping him out with ideas, and so I kind of posthumously hear about Steve from Trev, and it's kind of cool that and then Trev's like, I got to get you guys together for a cup of coffee when you come to L.A. I said, Trev, I will fly to L.A. and have a cup of coffee with Steve Perry.
No kidding. Boy, I'd love to
make it happen. So no pressure.
Love to be a fly on the wall at that one. And he says all this great stuff. He still loves, and what I love about what's happened, Steve Perry's turned around and embraced his time in Journey finally, and it's been some great articles talking finally about those days, and it's really great to see him embrace his legacy, and the fact that he was an architect of Journey. Where before, when he was in his solo mode, he was like, "Oh, don't talk about Journey." Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Dude, you gotta embrace Journey. You can't sidestep that one." But now he is embracing it, and I think he's back in a good place. He had some sad things happen. His girlfriend, passed away on him. He lost his mom. I mean, just he's had a lot of stuff to deal with, but he's back. And according to Trev Lukather, he Perry's on fire. I'm like, well, good for him, man.
That's awesome.
I love to hear that.
So you talk about meeting him, and you both shared we want to be on the. I love hearing our stuff on the radio, and you kind of make that either spoken or unspoken pact of that's what our music is going to be like.
Yeah.
So then you join the band. Escape comes out, and half the songs are big hits, basically.
Yeah. We had four top 40 singles, yeah.
Not to mention just, receiving this crazy adulation for Don't Stop Believing, with it being the biggest song of all time.
From Forbes magazine, yeah. And it was funny, when it came out, it was only number 9. And because we were fighting Michael Jackson, it was tough space to, you got Michael Jackson and the same thing. But the album went number 1, and we were selling, Rick, 200,000 a week.
That's amazing.
Escape. So, but SoundScans didn't start till 89. Think about this. And, Escape finally got the Diamond Award, which is $10 million, right? after all these years, we had already probably sold 7 million by 1989, and I don't know how much they counted of those sales.
Sure.
You know, and Frontiers was close behind. It should definitely get a Diamond Award because it's right there approaching the 10 million. So we had the greatest hits. Now the greatest hits album that came out in 90 something has went back on the charts because it sold 17 million vinyl. Can't even make that up.
Doesn't this just boggle your mind sometimes?
Yes, it does. And I had to pinch myself because one of the things that happened when I was with Steve in the beginning was the Beatles resurgence, right? And the Beatles, at 20 years later, were having this huge resurgence. They were back on the charts. They re-released all their product. And I was sitting with him, and he's saying to me, "Wouldn't it be great, John, if we had a song like Let It Be? You know, wouldn't it be great?"
Of course.
That 20 years later, we would get back on the charts. And here we are 40 years later, back on the charts.
Yeah.
With greatest hits. And, you know, here's the ironic thing, is the greatest hits, when it came out, never was going to be a vinyl. It was only a CD you could buy, right?
Oh,
and so
gotcha.
Sony Special Products, I went up to New York. We were doing a television appearance for CBS Morning Show, and the Sony guy came, and I said, you know, vinyl's going to make a resurgence, and it already is. It's big-time underground sales. I think you need to get our albums, you know, pressed.
Sure.
ASAP, you know, and they took my advice, and next thing I know, I saw the greatest hits 1 and 2, and then Escape, and then Frontiers re-released, and boy, did they ever sound good, you know. They were meant to be vinyl, you know. Those original pressings are rare. You can't, you know, and you could not buy. I went online to try to find some Escape albums for my friends, you know, and sign them and give them away, and they were vanishing. You know, you couldn't find any. And so there was that too. You know, you never want to see your media disappear, and that's with the digital age. I think our biggest fear is like, you know, your intellectual property just vanishes. You know.
Oh gosh.
Some of these VCR tapes that never got digitized.
Yeah.
I was part of this little kids movie back in the 70s with William Shatner called Whale of a Tale, and you know, it was just kind of a little dumb kid movie, and you know, he was part of this dolphin SeaWorld kind of thing, and there was this little kid who fell in love with the dolphin, and I scored it, right? I scored the whole thing and wrote these songs, and I went to look for it online, and it was gone, you know, and I paid $40 for one VCR.
Did you?
I did. I have it.
Oh man!
And it's the last, you know, remnant of. I mean, William Shatner and Andy Devine. I mean, these are two, you know, memorable characters. And yet, the movie company went belly up. Nobody picked up the distribution on it, and so much of the media now is just going to fall through the cracks. You'll never see it again. You know.
Yeah, it's going to deteriorate and be gone.
So it's really important, like, to have things digitized. And I had albums where the record companies went out of business. And when I wrote my book, Don't Stop Believing, I went and saved a couple of the songs on reel to reel, and I digitized them and I put them on an album, and I actually included them in the book on the audio version of my book because they were going to go away. You know, there was no record company, the album just vanished. You know, it's not even, you can't even get it anymore. So I kind of resurrected some of the works that I did early on. It was when I did I think when Journey kind of took a hiatus, it was in the 80s, because Steve Perry left in 87.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't come back till Trial by Fire. He left us hanging, and we did Bad English. And then he called us back in 86, and we did Trial by Fire together. And thankfully, you know, it was some great times with him and me. And just had, it was a rough road. You know, he was having health issues, a little bit we know.
Right.
But we still sat down in my studio that I had built there in Marin County and wrote 15 songs in about 2 weeks. And we were recording a new album. That's how good the chemistry still was, after almost 9 years of being away from each other.
So when you go to a process like that, and you say you wrote 15 songs in a couple of weeks, what do you have a specific method for doing that, or do you do lyrics first, melody second, or what's your chain of events for that?
I think it's so we didn't have bass and drums. It was just Steve and I and Neil, and we thought we would go unplugged. And Clive Davis always told me that if a song could live on the piano or an acoustic guitar, it could live anywhere, and it could be anything, And so that we just kind of took that. We had a little recorder, and whatever made us feel like we wanted to groove. And like, for example, the day and we wrote 5 days a week, right? We did day after day after day after day. We didn't skip a day.
Sure.
We wrote from Monday through Friday. It might have been 3 weeks. I can't remember. But we came in to the studio, and I had the intro for "When You Love a Woman," right?
Mm-hmm.
And Neil had I think he had the bridge for "When You Love a Woman," and then Perry had this melody. And it was, na, 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 na. I was like, that's "When You Love a Woman," see?
Yeah.
And he went, yeah, that's what that is. And then I had them, there it was. And just like magic, in a day, in an afternoon, "When You Love a Woman" was born. And it went on to be top 10. It went on to almost get nominated for a Golden American Music Award. I think we might have had even a Grammy nod on that one. And sadly, John Lennon won. He won for that tape that Yoko found in the closet.
Right.
Freeze the Bird. It was like Jeff Lynne and his magic, resurrected John Lennon from the dead. I mean, I got to give it to him. Who can do that?
Yeah, no kidding.
And they put Ringo on it. I mean, that was like some kind of digital magic that no one had seen before. To take John Lennon's voice from a cassette, right?
Yep.
But Paul McCartney's Ringo Starr. What are you going to do? You got to give him a Grammy.
I know. Yeah, you can't not, I suppose. So
right.
It's
a cassette. Here it is. So I always say, when you get, trumped by a Beatle, it's not so bad.
Not so bad. So you mentioned that,
he's one of my heroes.
You mentioned that, you had a little bit of the song and Steve had some and Neil had some. So you never really know fully where inspiration may come from or land. And you've told the story before, but I find it's just so cool to me that what is now considered the biggest song of all time, had it not been for your dad, may not have become the song that it is.
Well, it's absolutely true. And Perry was such a great band leader. Incredible how he would take us through rehearsals. He was such a technician. He played bass, drums, and sang his behind off every day, 5 days a week. It didn't matter. You could get him up at 10 o'clock in the morning. He was singing like a bird. And he had all these great ideas. And he looked at me the last day of rehearsals in our warehouse, and he said, "John, we need one more song for this record." And this is the end of the Escape rehearsals. One more song. And go in that book of yours, that magic book, because I have all these lyrics. I'm writing all the time lyrics, right? And see if you can pull something out. So I had looked at the back of this one lyric book that I had, and my dad had given me a pep talk when I was in L.A., struggling as a solo artist. And he said, "John, say the chorus, don't stop believing." And so I had this big doodle in the back of his lyric book. And so I looked at it, and I had a little Wurlitzer piano up in a spare room in the Divisadero in San Francisco. It was raining out, the skylight, and I started praying. I said, "God, give me a melody for this." just give me a melody.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I heard Perry's voice, and I went, well, okay, let's bring this in. It's what he had asked for, something in that magic lyric book. And all I had was the chorus, don't stop believing, hold on to that feeling, streetlight people, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I said, Steve, the only trepidation I have with this, presenting this song, is it has the vowel E. And you always told me, when we wrote songs, that you hated to sing an E vowel,
Oh,
leaving,
okay. Interesting.
and leaving. And he said, well, let me sing it. And I showed him the melody, and he goes, it's not that long of an E. He said, I just don't like big songs that go, E.
Right.
The E goes on to he couldn't stand the sound of an E because it sounded terrible. He was all about, how does it sing? How does it sound?
Yeah.
The same thing with South Detroit. We went through all of Detroit. He wanted Detroit because he had just made, that captured album live in Cobo Hall. And so we went through all what does East Detroit sound? Born and raised in East Detroit, nah. Born and raised in West Detroit, nah. In North Detroit, it's not bad. Born and raised in South Detroit, that's it. We didn't have Google, we didn't. And to this day, it's just because it sounded cool, And so when the critics would ask me, oh, there's no such thing as South Detroit. And I said, no, it's a city of possibility. It's an imaginary city where dreams come true.
There you go. You go.
It's like Big Fish. Like Big Fish never existed.
Right.
It was a place where things happen. And if you take the midnight train going to South Detroit, dreams can come true. And there it is, So we created this kind of little Big Fish mystery. And it was so cool because Neil had this beautiful guitar thing that he did in between the verses. It sounded like a train, tick, 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 tick. And I was like, I looked at Perry and I go, it's like the midnight train to Georgia, but it's not. We can't use that. I said, midnight train, and he looks at me going anywhere. I'm like, there it is. Midnight train going anywhere. Who's going and how they getting there?
I love
where
how
they going to,
I love how that stuff just kind of comes together, and again, how just a quick inspiration from your dad, becomes this iconic
and he got to see
thing.
it, Rick. He got to see the song, absolutely performed when we went back to Chicago there, and it was 82, 81, late 81, I think. He got him a limo, and he looked at me after the show and he said, good thing you didn't stop and leave. And I looked at him and I said, good thing I had the best old man in the world,
Now,
simply put.
So that was obviously some inspiration from your dad, and Jonathan, you're a faithful man, and was he key in that, or is your faith journey, pun may or may not be intended, on your own?
No. Listen, my father was a church-going man. He wasn't a religious man. He was a Jesus guy.
Yeah.
He loved Jesus, and I went to church with him as a boy, and I used to watch him sit down with his missal and close his eyes, kneel down on the pew, and then sometimes tears would come down his face, and I didn't know what was going on. I knew he was doing something. And so after Mass one day, I said, Dad, what were you doing when the tears were coming? He says, those are tears for Jesus. I'm like, well, you sure I want to know about that. Can you help me find Jesus? And he said, well, you're going to have to find Jesus on your own.
Yeah.
And I'm only 6 or something, I don't know. And I said, how do I do this? So you got to get on your knees and pray to him. Tell him he's your Savior. Tell him he's your salvation. Tell him, call him in. You got to call him in, John. So I tried for months, calling in Jesus on my knees.
Yeah. Well,
and it was a little kid's thing, but to this day, I still shed a tear for Jesus. Like just last night, I was leading worship at our church, and I was singing "Live in Hope," and I said the sacrifice is so great, that He made for us that, it's undescribable. And I started shedding a tear for Jesus once again. So thanks to Dad, he kept my faith intact. And, you have to have your own relationship, he said. He said, John, you got to have your own relationship with Jesus. I can't give you mine. And so many of the kids today have prayerful parents, they pray for them, but don't know how to pray to Jesus on their own, don't know how to call him in. Prayers are fine, but once you're on your own, you need your own relationship with God. That faith, the unseen, all of that, all those things, you have to be ready to go there, and if I hadn't had my father take time out, with his son and say, this is why we go to church,
Yeah.
And, I had a rough time because of the fire in Chicago in '58 when my Catholic school burned down in front of my eyes,
Right.
2:30 in the afternoon, 30 minutes from, dismissal, and watching 92 kids die, in the fires of hell.
Yeah.
You just go, man, what in the hell?
Exactly.
And it was just kind of abandoned. I felt abandoned and weird, and that's when my father took me by the hand and said, we're going to shift you into music. It's going to be your redemption, your salvation. You're going to find a new set, a new place to start. And sure enough, I went to music school, and I got back on track, and, I found music to be an escape, a huge escape for me from all of that. And I asked my dad to get me out of that school after they rebuilt it. I just couldn't. It was too
much.
Spooky. Too spooky, man. And we were all crazy. It was one flew over the cuckoo's nest, man. All the classes, the kids were just damaged from it, traumatized.
Exactly.
Can't study there, can't learn anything there. So he understood and got me out of that school and took me to Catholic school. And we moved away from that neighborhood, thankfully, out to the suburbs, and we were able to reset and start our life again. And that was all my dad's doing. He was just a great prophet. And he was the one that predicted when the bartender pouring him a scotch and water said, what's your son going to do with those accordion lessons, Lenny? And my dad he turns around, he looks at me, he goes, he's going to be a big star. He's going to sing in front of 10,000 people someday. That's what he's going to do. And I would just go, what? What is this you're singing? I'm only 8 years old, I got my accordion case next to me. I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. But I received it. I told him, listen, I'll listen to you. And he stood by me. So in the 60s, it was kind of unheard of that a father would support a musical endeavor. And then I got accepted by Northwestern for journalism. I was the editor of our newspaper, editor of our high school newspaper, and transformed the newspaper, did some unbelievable things, gave it a new look, gave it a new voice. And Northwestern journalistic department was so impressed, not my grades necessarily, but what I had done with the newspaper, And they wanted me, and I didn't have the money to go to Northwestern, neither did my dad,
Right.
So I looked at my dad and I said, I'm going to pick music. I'm not going to put any pressure on you. This is going to have to just go by the wayside. I'm honored that, but there's going to be a book down the road. And I was able to get that done, which is a miracle. I mean, first of all, I read the Stephen King book on writing, and he says everybody has a book, and I got inspired, and I had a laptop. I started writing, and 10 years later, the book came out. Zondervan, HarperCollins, no joke, got the big advance, and really proud of getting published as an author. That really meant a lot. And telling my story, the whole story, to Journey. So it's kind of like a journey to journey, on words. Because I started out writing this book called, kind of a coming of age story about Chicago and the fire and my take on the 50s and 60s in Chicago, which is another book, altogether. And they wanted the journey piece,
Of course.
So I had to spend another couple of years, getting, and I found this great editor who really helped me put all the relevant things together. And we really wrote a great, I think it's a perfect way to tell the story. And also, it's a tale of encouragement and possibility. Anybody that, thinks they're stuck or can't make it, or
Right.
it's, but those are different days, different times. It's so much different now with the internet, and still you have to study your craft and figure out how to market yourself, and all the things I did are all changed now. The only thing that hasn't changed is a great song is still a great song,
So
and you can't take over.
you mentioned that, and I'm glad you led me right to this, because you mentioned, about the original pressings being either hard or impossible to find, and all of that. So you think about it, when we grew up, you had albums and 8-tracks and cassettes, and then it was CDs and all of this other stuff. But and to be, blunt and honest with people, that's how you guys made a lot of money, was by selling, physical copies of your music.
Product,
and it was stuff
ownership.
it was stuff that we held on, that, we held in our hands and read the liner notes and looked at the cover art and all that stuff. So obviously that is so much different now with the internet and digital. Can a band like Journey have made a living now, or become what Journey became in this environment?
That's a good question. It would have been a struggle, I got to say, because they, first of all, Columbia Records could make or break you. I mean, they had the power with radio, with their influencers, to do things. We had a terrific manager who was using the influencers to influence, and radio stations got on board with Journey right away. After Steve Perry joined in '77 and Affinity, and Columbia Records wanted a new voice. They didn't want, Greg Rowley as the main voice anymore. They actually had an ultimatum. If Herbie hadn't found a new voice, they were going to get dropped from Columbia, right?
Uh-huh.
That's a true story. And, Steve Perry shows up on a cassette in a bag of pot to Herbie from San Joaquin Valley, because he bought pot from that area. He was a big pot smoker. And there's Steve Perry's cassette. He gets it out and plays it. Oh my God, I love this guy's voice. And Steve's bass player had died sadly in a car accident and looking for a gig. He signed, they had demos that were really good, and so our manager at the time, Herbie Herbert, presented Steve Perry to the band, and they all shrugged it off, saying, "He sounds too much like a girl. We're not going there, Right. And Herbie was like, "They're making a mistake. They don't get it. These guys are knuckleheads."
Yeah.
So he brought Steve Perry to Neil to write one afternoon, just random. Just brought him in, took him up to the hotel and the elevator, and said, "Write with this guy and see what you come back with." So an hour later, they come down with a song, and Neil's like, "I might overlook this guy. He's pretty damn good. I got to say, Herbie, you might be right." And so the next thing you know, they write Lights.
Wow.
And Wheel and this guy, they had this guy Robert Fleischman. Anyway, it was the way it evolved, and it was organic. And these days, no, you're not going to have all that, unless you had that street thing, that brotherhood. And there's some bands that still have it, that are successful.
But there's just not there's not the.
But there has to be that brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever it is that comes from the street, that comes from a real place. I think to manufacture anything today, it's you look at some of these. You got K-pop, right? And they were totally manufactured. Boy band, just copying the Backstreet Boys.
Yep.
But the Backstreet Boys are the real deal. They were all buddies. That's like the Beatles. You think about John and Paul growing up together in the same school. That is what the real deal is. And unless you have that, it's pretty tough. You have to have that brotherhood, the friendship, the camaraderie to get through the rough times. And, Journey had that. Today, I don't know. I mean, I look at it all and go, you have to have a crafty management company that knows, how to TikTok, how to do all this stuff. In those days, bands were supposed to be mysterious and not give away all this stuff,
Yeah, you're right.
We were
You're
taught
right.
to not, give away everything. And today, guys from our era are not going to succeed because they're not transparent. They don't know how to communicate to fans. They don't give fans a reason to love them. I had some guy ask me, like, how am I going to get an older guy like me wants to put this group of guys, kind of from other bands. And I said, you've got to give them a reason to love you online.
Right. Right.
It's what it is. Yeah.
Very, very weird. So you've got
And Taylor Swift did it. Annie DeFranco did it. Annie DeFranco is the mother of internet creation. Annie DeFranco did it. She sold 1 million records without a record company. She engaged her audience. She gave them what they wanted. They went crazy for her. And she proved the record companies were not necessary. But she had a plan, a strategy. She knew she was savvy. It's almost like you have to have a social media team behind a band today. If you don't, I have a little protege singer that I work with, and she's an amazing songwriter. But she has no TikTok. She has no following, not to speak of. And she went to RCA, was interested in. They told her, if you don't come back when you have 1 million followers.
Man,
what?
How disheartening is that?
Oh my goodness, people have no idea how difficult. And Taylor Swift is another great bridge to how the internet drives, how the fandom drives your career, and you have to give your fans a reason, and I don't think, Perry with he was kind of shy and didn't want to make videos, didn't want to be on a camera. No way. He would have never been able to cut it today,
Right.
But today, you've got to be camera friendly, you've got to be internet friendly, you have to say the right things, you've got to pull them in, you've got to give them a reason. Make it intriguing. What's that reason? Like this guy, Teddy Swims, he comes out singing Don't Stop Believing on the street, right? And probably does it better than most people do, and gets a record deal just by singing Don't Stop Believing on TikTok.
Right. Well, that's kind of in a backwards way how you found Arnell too.
Well, that's it. He was, he didn't post it. So Arnell didn't self-promote.
Oh, really?
He had a friend. No. He had a friend that posted the videos that he took at Starbucks. He went to the Manila, and the only, way he could get videos off his phone and post them was going to Starbucks and spending hours there. And he actually was the one that posted a video of Arnell singing Faithfully that I saw. And when we went to Manila, I got to thank him for that, and so Arnell wasn't self-promoting himself, not like
right.
He was just singing, trying to make a living and supporting his family. He had brothers, and his mother died, and his father was a poor tailor, and he was almost homeless a couple times, So he had, and then when I got the video, I was like, well, that's great, but he's 3,000 miles away. How are we going to get him to the States, And in one piece, with Homeland Security being the way it was. And our management at the time made it happen, and they did a great job of getting him to us, and we spent about 10 days with him, and he came around, and he was the guy. We sent him to our vocal coach, and he said, you found your guy. He's definitely the man.